Good evening. My name is Kalin, Metodiev, and on behalf of the Managing Board of CFA Society Bulgaria, I would like to welcome you to this final panel of the day. But as they like to say, we're saving the best for last, right? There we go. There we go. I like the enthusiasm. Let's keep it up this way. In preparation for this conference, I would like to thank our wonderful team at CFA Society Bulgaria, first of all, for this organization, for all of their efforts during these 2 days, and I'll let you individually thank them on the way out. But I particularly liked the way this panel was titled, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Finance. CFA Charterholders or not, should we worry? And I'm reading at this title and I'm thinking, this is a finance conference, we're finance people. Of course we worry, this is what we do. We overanalyze things all the time. We overproject millions of different scenarios, for our clients, and of course we worry, for us and for them. So I think, no matter what everybody, here thinks, yes, we do worry. Only, of course, we're all esteemed professionals. We wear nice suits, so in front of our clients, we call it something like inherent asymmetrical risk and risk management, to make it sound more important. But yes, we do worry. On the topic of artificial intelligence, obviously a fascinating new frontier for innovation, for business activity that is permeating every single corner of the world's economy. And of course, there is already a proven track record, right? There is, immense increases in productivity, resource optimization, enhancement of profitability. But at the same time, those of you who know us very well at our society, we don't like to just touch lightly on subjects. We would like to dig deep and peel all the peels of the onion, going all the way to the bottom. And this is exactly what I intend to accomplish today with our great speakers, and with your help, with any questions that will come from the audience. And hopefully, again, we go into the opportunities of this industry, but we also cover in depth the threats and the challenging aspects. So to speak, let's keep our eyes closed, when we peel the peels of the onion, so we don't cry at the end. But before I introduce my two great speakers, that I've had the privilege already of having a preliminary discussion with, and I'm sure that you will enjoy this interaction with them. I just couldn't help but notice, am I the only one in the audience, that noticed that, especially in the afternoon session, you have all these amazing panels, but all of them on the average have 3 to 4 panelists, and now we have 2. And I'm thinking, what's going on? This is an AI panel, and we're already, eliminating, people. AI is eliminating people. We're losing people. If you see me leave the stage, within the next 30 minutes, AI has taken care of me too. It's just we're becoming less and less obsolete. But no, seriously, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists today. So I'll start with Didem Ateş on the left side, founder and CEO of LotusAI. She's an AI executive, algorithm auditor, and executive coach, advising prominent private equity, financial services, and consulting firms on how to use and scale AI. Didem sits on the boards of multiple foundations and councils, including the AI Council for Goldman Sachs Asset Management. So please give a round of applause for Didem. And then immediately to my side is Brian Pisaneschi, a fellow CFA Charterholder and senior investment data scientist at CFA Institute, where he's leading the charge on CFA Institute's open source AI initiatives. He builds tools and workflows that help investment professionals put generative AI to work. And we'll find out later on if basically he's putting us CFA charter holders out of business. Hopefully not. Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is the last panel. We want to make sure that you enjoy it, you benefit from it. Let's make it more interactive. I have about 7 or 8 questions for our panelists, and of course, then I'll give as much opportunity to the audience to ask questions as possible. If you don't mind, I'll start with Brian. So let's just lay out the fundamentals here. What exactly is artificial intelligence, and what are the various models for its practical application these days?
All right, so I'm a data scientist, so I'm about to nerd out a little bit. So if we think about AI, we can think about it in bubbles, not an AI bubble, but you put AI in a bubble. Inside that bubble, you have machine learning. Inside that bubble, you have traditional machine learning, and you have deep learning. Inside deep learning, you have the neural network. Now, I am also a CFA Charterholder, and as a CFA Charterholder, I like to kind of ground it in linear regression, something that we all got hammered into our heads when we took the exams. So if you think about linear regression, which falls in the traditional ML space, it can actually be done in a closed form formula, but it's just y equals mx plus b, or beta parameters and an alpha. But again, it can be done in this closed form formula, but it can also be done iteratively in a solver. Now, a neural network is essentially a connected version of tons of linear regressions. And instead of trying to solve for the least squares, minimizing the least squares, we are solving for predicting probability. In fact, we're solving for predicting or minimizing the probability of surprise. So what we do with large language models is we scale that up to trillions now parameters. So parameters are just those beta coefficients and the alpha coefficients. And you just change those dials and knobs to maximize minimize the probability of surprise, essentially. Okay, so now if you take that trillion parameter neural network and you apply it to predicting the probability of the next words, essentially what we first have to do is we have to take our words and turn it into vectors. So the way we do that is we train predicting probability off of a large part of the internet. So originally, 3 terabytes of internet data to train the GPT model. So once you've done that, you essentially have these vectors that ultimately are, they're similar words will be co-located in this similar space in vector space. So the semantic meaning of words are captured there. And I know it's late, I'm talking about vectors, so bear with me. So now we have this model that does a really, really good job at predicting the next words. So that's GPT. That was the attention mechanism that did that, allowing for us to attend to different words given other words around it. Now, what we did from there is we had to get it to a point where it is what we like to interact with, so question answering. So we trained the model to be a question answering kind of machine. That was when we had the launch of ChatGPT. We did that using reinforcement learning with human feedback. So we just had people go in and say, okay, I like this answer better than that answer, and there was a reinforcement learning algorithm that got it to the point where we really liked the output. So that was kind of the original form of ChatGPT. The next step was to connect it to tools. Well, originally we had connecting it to web search, but in order for us to do that really well, we had to, again, fine-tune these models to be able to create machine-readable, structured outputs. So we did that, and OpenAI did that, to make sure that it could produce these machine-readable outputs called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. That allowed us to create tools, or allowed the LLM to be able to call tools. That has essentially enabled agentic AI, because once it can call tools, it can call APIs, it can call these outside data sources, it can call functions. And that's what we're experiencing now. So we have this dawn of agentic AI that connects to the outside world with tools, and multi-step process, and I can get into how that works in a bit, but I'll let Didem kind of continue with this, with the actual use cases, before I go any further.
Sure, let's stay on the fundamentals at the beginning. So Didem, from my more limited exposure to the industry, you know, I've been reading about, you know, going through traditional, then generative, then agentic AI, which also Brian mentioned. From your extensive consulting practice, how do you actually see organizations implement these tools in their actual operations?
Yeah, absolutely. But before that, can I build on Brian's explanation? Because I do want to make sure all of us leaders in this room are very, very comfortable. We don't need to worry about the technical terms or something, but the way I explain AI is a bit like algorithms mimicking our brain. It's as simple as that. For those of you with children in the audience, you'll know when a baby is born, they have to see enough apples and oranges to understand what's an apple versus an orange. It's the same thing with AI. They just have to learn from that. And as you know, my friends here explained, there's the traditional AI, which I started my journey with 15 years ago, and then we had generative, where you start to generate the next piece of content, audio, visual, whatever. It could be everything, not just text. Now, agentic brought a new thing where if we allow these algorithms, they can do our tasks or workflows for us. That's important. Proactively, it could be an expense, let's say, submission, or it could be a whole end-to-end customer service journey, if we allow that. That's where the technology is right now. So in terms of applications in finance, we're all in, my first 12, 13 years in AI has been working with Fortune 500 companies, the largest AI engagements at Microsoft, where we would help these customers build their strategy, roadmap, implementations, etc., across all industries, but mostly large organizations. The last 2.5 years, Goldman Sachs is one case, but our typical clients are private equity, private credit, and hedge funds, which are like 20 to 100 people companies, right? It's the same. It is the whole value chain. What not to do in AI is to come up with an exciting idea, and whoever shouts the most or whoever has the most budget does that. That's how not to implement AI. How to implement AI is looking at the whole chain. In other words, if you're a private equity firm, clearly you're going to do origination, sourcing deals. You're going to do your due diligence. You're going to do your transaction. You'll grow that company, manage your portfolio, and you'll exit. There are hundreds of tools, off-the-shelf tools, platforms, agents available today under each of those umbrellas. Not to mention growing the portfolios, accelerating the exit for the portfolios. So it really depends on us, as you mentioned, it really depends on how we want to unpeel the onion. Some of my clients are building swarms of agents. They call it the 100 Jonas's project, for instance. They have 2 research analysts to source deals, but with the help of agents, thematic agents, supporting agents, etc., they power their research team to a 100-people team. 2 humans, 98 agents. So other clients, because they are fundraising, they do relationship intelligence with AI. How do I get more money from my current LPs? How do I source new LPs? So it depends. Sorry for the long answer, but it's across the whole chain.
And let me just dwell on this a little further. So basically, you're saying that the organizations that you advise, they not only use agents that are sifting through publicly available data for origination, for research, for validation of data points, but more and more they're actually feeding their own organizational data into the agents, to actually
So
extract
publicly
value.
available data is one layer. Then you have the enrichment data, which you could buy from Bloomberg, Preqin, whatever you're buying from Source Scrub. And then you have your own business data. The business data is very important because that's your data garden. Not just your deal data, how you did your NDAs, DDQs, etc., but also your LP data and portco data. There's a triangle of data estate that you could do wonders with. That's your IP. That's your defensible moat against AGI, like artificial general intelligence. It's very difficult, it's getting very, very difficult to differentiate, to have a competitive edge, and to have a defensible moat in private equity, for example, because of artificial intelligence.
Very interesting, and of course we'll talk a little further in our discussion about what might be some of the risks related to feeding your data into, I don't know, it looks like a black box to me, that's only getting smarter, through the information that we're feeding it. But Brian, let's expand now a little bit past the fundamentals. And one thing that I've been reading about recently more and more about is that the agentic AI is now evolving into agentic flow, which basically becomes more independent, and then you can really rely on these algorithms to independently make decisions while the developers chill. I don't know. What are the outcomes of such a wider deployment for various industries and for the global economy?
All right, so there's maybe some confusion. So basically you have these kind of two types of agentic AI. You have an agentic workflow. And the agentic workflow is essentially this predefined step-by-step process. Typically, it involves a developer to do, or someone with a significant amount of technical ability to code it up in Python. And inside that step-by-step process, we can come up with evaluations. We can stress test each node, where each node might, if we create a credit research analyst agentic workflow, the first node might be follow up with questions, follow up for more information. The second node might be, okay, now I'm going to come up with queries to go out to the search for the web for that information. Or I'm going to connect to an internal vector database so we can pull in our information that we've uploaded. And then the fourth node might be do some calculations, calculate some financial metrics. And then the last one might be summarize it up into a report. But again, each one of those steps is controllable, and each one, well, to a certain degree, these systems are non-deterministic. Even at the most deterministic behavior are still non-deterministic, which is an issue. But they're far more controllable than a system that just reasons through a process in this, what's called the react cycle, reasoning and action cycle, where it's given a task, it comes up with a plan, and then it has connections to outside tools and databases, and it goes and it takes that information, it observes the results, and it comes up with another plan, and then it goes through the cycle over and over and over again until it's reasoned that it's completed the task, and then it produces an output. So that is a far less controllable system, far less auditable system, and of course within finance we have high cost of error tasks. So we need to build more agentic workflows. However, the majority of the use of AI is been in this agent space. So that's what's in ChatGPT. That's what's in Anthropic's Claude, is this more autonomous reasoning where we don't have that ability to kind of stress test and create these evaluations and really know what's going on.
And one additional detail, so for my better understanding, hopefully the audience will benefit from it too. So again, what I've been reading is that the individual agents are more or less, tools that you give predefined tasks to. So you basically tell them, do this, do that, execute this, summarize, just like you said, extract, prepare, text, presentation, and so forth. But this workflow, the agentic workflow, basically allows us, not to assign tasks, but to assign goals. And then, basically the tools themselves, have to think and process and reach the final stage of this goal. Not just tell them, for example, summarize and tell me which are the, let's say, for example, the top 50 value stocks on whatever index, but you're actually telling it, allocate up to 5%, for example, and just deploy trades with a drawdown of 10%, for example. And then is, when you actually rely on this ecosystem to achieve certain predefined goals for you. Is this correct?
Can I chime in? So Kalin, I think that's a fantastic question, and I do want to unpack it, clarify the concepts. First, an AI agent, if any of you have Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude, you could build a Copilot to review your NDAs. That's just one task with your whatever, or DGQ and Copilot, whatever that's one agent doing one thing properly your way, with your data, etc. Then there's agentic AI, like Brian and Kalin are referring to, where agentic AI is, think of it like an orchestration of multiple agents and even humans, where you get a big job done. And that is where we are right now. Some of you will remember DeepSeek from last year. Why did it become such a big thing? Because it had teacher algorithms and student algorithms. The teacher algorithm said, you, Didem, you're going to learn Italian, and then you, Brian, you're going to learn Greek, whatever, it doesn't have to be languages, of course. And that way, these algorithms started to orchestrate themselves. So agentic AI is a very, very, very important concept. So if we come back to your question about how do we control for impact, etc., I gave you the sourcing swarm of agents, right? Of course, thematic agents. I could have one agent looking for energy deals, renewables deals, another one for healthcare deals. And then I have to orchestrate them as my research team to come back and bring me the short list of deals. I don't want to go through 10,000 deals every day, type of thing. So does that help with?
And through machine learning, you can also make them your traders and not just your research.
Yes, a real example. I have a client, solo entrepreneur, one person with 4 family office mandates. So he's managing the wealth of 4 families, and he's building a wealth management platform, agentic platform, AI native. This can be done, right? That's exactly what you're referring to, right?
Sure.
Wealth management platform.
Very interesting. Didem, let's stay with you for a couple of more minutes, because I would like to depart a little further from the theoretical fundamentals that we just laid out and just go into, I like examples, I'm sure the audience does as well. So let's talk from your client portfolio. If you can give us some specific examples, of overview of industries, business segments. Of course, don't mention the names of individual companies. We know that's confidential. But which are the segments that are experiencing the greatest changes due to the AI revolution, and what would you say are what are those things that translate most notably to the bottom line?
Yeah. So, for those of you who are interested, Stanford AI Index is one of the most reliable, if I may say so, Bibles of the industry, and it just got published for 26 2 weeks ago or something. So according to them, that's where I keep, one of the places I keep an eye out on. But for years, regardless of 2026 latest agentic whatever, it is always the industries with biggest data, of course finance, telcos, media, healthcare are top. In terms of spending, AI spending, finance is the largest. Again, closely head to head with telcos. In terms of functions, like the impact you asked, you could list pretty much any function, customer service, sales, legal, The highest ones are customer service and sales. 60% revenue growth is possible with AI in any company. I'm not talking just finance. In terms of cost reduction, again, up to 56%. And it varies function by function because some tasks there are more repetitive tasks in some functions than others. And that's where you have the biggest EBITDA impact, if that makes sense. Did I answer your question?
You did. Brian, let's build on this thought a little further. So if we're looking at this kind of cost savings, high double digit, I wonder, from your experience and what you're seeing in the market, how far along is the artificial intelligence development in comparison to human capabilities? Specific examples again, statistics, this would be very helpful. And what is, now and what is expected in the near future, because we see that this industry is, evolving literally by the week or by the month.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely dependent on what domain you're in from a human capability standpoint. So Anthropic announced Claude Mythos not too long ago that found zero-day vulnerabilities in every major operating system and web browser, and one that's been around for 19 years that a human has been reviewing on a regular basis. So these are things that essentially have either exceeded our capabilities already, or at our expert level. So this is where essentially, though, AI has accelerated the most. Of course, we've heard of the SaaS apocalypse. It is due to the fact that the coding abilities of these tools have been the first thing that they can get to a very high level of capability, because it has an objective output that can be essentially iterated and reinforcement learned to get to an either right or wrong kind of code answer. So there's those types of capabilities that, again, I definitely think are surpassing humans. But at the same time, there's other ones that are terrible. There's this guy I follow on LinkedIn who's Peter Grossman, I think. And he's come up with a bullshit benchmark. And this bullshit benchmark essentially just asks large language models really stupid questions, like, what's the load-bearing capacity of the soil in my garden? And so the metric essentially is how much does the AI push back? Because any human would push back and be like, load-bearing capacity of soil doesn't make much sense. But even Anthropic's most capable model, Claude 4.7, it could only push back around 87% of the time. And so there's these abilities that are very much still lacking. There's another one that's was very popularized back when reasoning models first came out. Reasoning models had this ability for them to kind of think through their thoughts. OpenAI had this big release called Strawberry, and that was because it couldn't count the letters strawberry. It was always going with 2. And And so that was their big thing. They created this reasoning model that could think through its thought and do it. But then more recently, I saw somebody post, okay, what are the letters in the straw fairy? And it still got it wrong. So there are these things where, again, if it's not in the training data, if it's novel, there are these difficulties.
Kalin, can I add to that? Because I will respectfully disagree on some point, but not everything. But I just mentioned algorithms are mimicking human brain, right? That's the simple, if I may say so. But we have 5 senses, so it could be object recognition, seeing, comprehension, hearing, whatever. All these things, which we call narrow AI, one by one, just seeing things and identifying the right way, have been better than humans for more than 10 years. Like comprehension, reading, etc. The challenge was bringing those 5 senses together through neural networks, agentic AI, and whatnot. I humbly believe that AGI is already here. It started with DeepSeek, accelerated this January with OpenClaw and all these other very mind-blowing things. Because AGI, in other words, these algorithms becoming more or smarter than humans, in my view, is not something, we go to bed one night and there's no AGI, and we wake up in the morning, there's AGI. It's not going to be 0 or 1. It is the technology, the plumbing is there, it's just learning. And as Brian pointed out, some things it's still really, really in the beginning of the learning journey. Other things it's very, very good. So that's the discrepancy and confusion, if I may say so, but it's definitely powerful. And it's just learning. Just like, humans or interns, you can't expect to hire someone and deliver value on their first day.
I just want to add one more thing. That is basically, I think, has been a capability more recently. It's not necessarily even a capability, but it's a trend more recently, and that's the adoption of this skills framework. So skills are essentially master prompts. They're very detailed master prompts that you can very easily create now with AI within Claude. OpenAI has adopted the framework as well. But inside these skills are a description of tasks, very detailed. So workflows, what it's supposed to do, the connectors that it comes to from outside sources. And the important part is it has this gotcha section. And this gotcha section essentially is where the LLM went wrong, where the agent went wrong. And what's happening is that you iterate, and as you're iterating, you say, I didn't do that right. I'm gonna add it to my skill file that it got you. Hey, you did that wrong. Let's change it so you don't do that again. And so when you do this on an individual level, it's just building out a master prompt. But if you scale that across an organization, you're really enhancing the ability. And then if you scale it across an industry in an open source environment, the capabilities of these models, just by the fact that people are building out these skill files, are dramatically enhancing the capabilities of these models, even if the underlying models didn't get any better, just because people are building these skill files are making it so capable.
Kind of like this, what we're reading, that these CAPTCHAs, for our security, is actually not providing security to us, but teaching the models for free. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have spent, I think, enough time in this presentation just, polishing up the surface. Let's just scratch, on it a little bit and go down. So Didem, help me understand the following. I read also, that yes, this field creates immense opportunities, but at the same time, there are already plenty of voices of concern. First of all, because, to win the AI race, you need to constantly invest immense amounts, and we have seen some of the funds, that have been raised already in the field, and the investors have already been told that, the expectation for further investments is there, now, today, otherwise this whole thing, just sort of withers and, dies off in the future. Then you have the running costs, you have replacement costs for all this technology, you have environmental concerns. You know, I read somewhere that, you know, just the water that is being used, you know, for, first of all, for the production of chips, you know, that are necessary, but then also for cooling, you know, let's say, it's just absolutely incredible amounts, you know, and I think, you know, all of our colleagues, you know, that are involved on the, nature side of things, you know, the nature preservation, you know, things, preservation of resources, the Green Deal, you know, and so forth. And they're just probably just pulling their hairs out, you know, reading, you know, how much resources are being used. Energy, you know, of course, I think, you know, until the AI topic became prevalent, you know, during this year and last year. Before that, I would say 2023, 2024, we were reading every single or every other day about how much energy is being used for mining of Bitcoin, you know, and how this is not eco-friendly and ESG funds, you know, should never invest. And then all of a sudden, AI, yes, great advancements, but at what cost, you know, and this is, I would like, you know, for you to share your thoughts, you know, and again, your practical experience, you know, how are companies coping now or prepared to cope with these immense actual investments and ecological expectations from the investment community and society so that they can, you know, basically continue growing this model exponentially.
Wow, thank you. At 6 o'clock or something, you asked me 100 questions. How much time do we have? I will try, if you don't mind, Kalin, I'm going to try to structure in several buckets, and if the audience is interested, we can dive deeper. First, in terms of, let's say, us in the audience with some kind of organization, some kind of leadership roles, this is an expensive business. I mean, as you both pointed out, there's the setup buying cost, there's the running cost, there's the talent cost. It's not just the technology. You have to teach, learn, etc. So that, it's expensive business, but there is no other option. I mean, I was in another CFO forum last week at London Business School, and we were at a panel. Basically, one of the panelists rightly said, if you're not already using AI, you're dead. Like, there is no way you can catch up. I completely agree. That's the situation right now. So whether it's expensive or not, you have to get on with it. And the journey is a tough one. It's frustrating, it's expensive, it's time consuming, but you have to get on it to get better. It's not optional. So that's at company level. At global level, I often find a lot of confusion, unfortunately. There is a bubble, is it a hype? There is the infrastructure piece, which may or may not be a bubble. And there is the enterprise AI or applications piece is definitely not a bubble, because we are not even scratching the surface there. On the infrastructure side, my 12 years of my 15 years in AI have been with Microsoft, starting with their first business AI team within Microsoft Research, and then AI engineering team. We launched their first AI SaaS platform. I helped with OpenAI partnership. We launched Copilot Suite, blah, blah, blah. These companies have very, very, very smart finance teams. They are not going to invest billions in a thing that they don't believe in. But I have also seen fiber. I'm old enough to know, yes, infrastructure can go wrong. We know that. So they may be wrong still. But that's less of a problem for people like us in this room, I think, than the enterprise AI piece, because there's huge opportunities there. In terms of environmental costs, and like at Schneider Electric, my last corporate role, I had a team of PhDs working on this problem. Like, how can we use AI to help environmental problems, climate change, all of these things? How can we use AI for good and also reduce its horrible impact on all these things, energy and so on? It's a complex problem, but it can be done. The way I would tie all of this is, right now, AI is such a geopolitical, like, it's #1 priority, right, in the world. whether you think China versus US or Bulgaria versus something else, it is #1 priority. The money is in space and defense. AI for space and AI for defense. So they will sort it out. I mean, for me, it's a technical thing to sort out the energy problem. It will be sorted out because that's where the attention is and the money is.
I would like to have your optimism, for sure. Let's make sure that we get there. But in the meantime, while listening to you, I'm just resonating on what you said. That it's the #1 priority globally. And it's in a way on a geopolitical race. So, just a follow-up question is, I just couldn't help but think, about the world of oil and natural resources. And there is a textbook definition there, called the Dutch disease, or resource curse. And I'm starting to think, I don't know if there is such a translation in AI. Is there something called AI curse? So if it isn't, I want to stay on record that I'm coining this term tonight, But essentially, if all the resources are being squeezed, from other industries, people are saying, I'm not going to be a lawyer anymore. I don't want to study to become a lawyer. I don't want to be a designer, because all of these jobs will be obsolete. I want to work with AI agents, just get involved in workflow, and then all of this talent and all of this money, all of these resources are being channeled, to just one point, then we know what happens, everything else stagnates, and then it just overly concentrates on a segment, but everything else around stops working. And we know that, this is a complete disbalance in the equilibrium of the global economy. So again, massive requirements for investments and running costs, and all this talent, just running in one direction to win this global geopolitical race, So I'm just, for me, again, worrying about things, professionally, and thinking how we can solve this. I really hope, that there are smart enough people out there to figure it out and make it happen. What's your impression?
So figuring out, my comment about that was about energy challenge, environmental impact. But in general, and this is my true belief, I'm not trying to be Pollyanna here, I'll give a very tangible example. How many of you know the term vibe coding? Great. Many of you. So for those who may not have been familiar with it, vibe coding is when we talk or chat, text with an algorithm to develop a business. It could be a website, it could be an app, whatever. The term was coined by a famous developer called Karpathy in February 25. And just one of the companies that allows us to do vibe coding is called Lovable, a Swedish company. By June 25, in 3 months, basically, or 4 months, there were 750,000 businesses built with vibe coding, monetizing, not so-called startups without money, but real monetizing businesses. Now, I want to bring it back. This, for me, is a massive source of optimism because entrepreneurship is already exploding. My personal concern is we have millions, billions of people who don't even know the term vibe coding. Does that make sense? So there's this marginalization, this gap between the doers, and you don't even need to be a coder anymore. You just need to come up with a business idea. Between the doers and the people who are just afraid, trying to cover their heads under the carpet and just stay, like not change. I think that's the opportunity and challenge for our society.
And of course, I fully understand, and the audience does as well, that we can base our understanding and answers on the current set of information that we have. All of this can change 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, next year. So of course, next year we have a similar conference, we might give different answers. But Brian, we talked about obviously investment input, costs, environmental concerns. Let's talk a little bit about people. I speak with so many colleagues and also people my age with young children, and they're saying, what should we tell our children? You know, what should they study? What kind of career path should we nudge them, you know, towards? You know, I mean, what do we tell them now? What do we tell them 10 years from now? You know, what are some of the industries that you're already seeing might not make it in the near future? What are you also telling the CFA Charterholders? You know, people who are in the CFA curriculum and preparing to, you know, just follow in our steps and take over navigating the global economy. And keep in mind that before you arrived today, the Chief Product Officer of CFA Institute said today that most likely CFA Charterholders' role in the future will be to validate the work of AI in the future, yeah?
All right, well, let's start with the disruption because Didem mentioned vibe coding. So I kind of assumed that we all knew about the SaaS apocalypse, but maybe we don't. But essentially back in, well, the January of this year, but that's what's interesting because if you're using these tools, you would have known that these capabilities were there a month in advance before Wall Street Journal put out an article. And so if you want some alpha, you know, just start using these tools significantly and you'll start to realize these capabilities when they happen in real time. But that's obviously one of the biggest disruptors. And so, but at the same time, even though software developers and engineers are, you know, perceived to be super, you know, susceptible to AI, they're also still the ones that are kind of most in demand right now. If you have some further push from the SaaS market that will kind of actually put these companies out of business, maybe that would shift slightly, but at the same time, the software developers, the ones that have that technical capabilities are the ones that are most, are applying these tools most. And so that's what I would also tell charterholders, like, you need the domain expertise, absolutely. Domain expertise going forward, I mean, even if you thought about, like, okay, AI is AGI and nobody has any job anymore, well, the government's gonna step in and they're gonna create a bunch of infrastructure work for everybody to do. Well, why would we just give everybody a job in infrastructure? We would still want people overseeing the most important and high-risk things and we would want them knowledgeable about that domain. So you have to be upskilling, you have to be able to understand the tools, understand the technology, and at the same time, understand your field, because in the future, it's going to be about that holistic knowledge. That's where creativity comes in, and that's, of course, one of the biggest differentiators right now is creativity. Even just purely from the aspect of novelty. We always seek out novelty, and I think we underestimate our ability to, when somebody's talking about something boring, that we just kind of start blocking it out. And same thing with AI generated things, it's very quick, like at first it's really cool, and then it becomes pretty boring. You're like, okay, I get this, I've seen it before. So being able to have that creative side, and I'm not just talking about art and design, I am thinking about our industry as well, being able to piece together everything. Because when you finish the CFA, you can piece things together. I mean, you really feel like you have this holistic understanding of finance, and that is such an important factor that will continue going forward.
One thing that you mentioned just sort of stuck in my head, and I want to ask both of you for your individual opinions. So you said that even in the future, if everybody's job becomes obsolete, the government will step in and they will assign everybody infrastructural jobs. But in my sort of interpretation of current events and, you know, what the future might hold for us, you know, the last peel of the onion, you know, for me is what government? You know, if AI becomes so knowledgeable and so powerful, we're all obsolete, you know, not just our jobs, you know, what does AI need us for? And, you know, these are not my thoughts, by the way. I had much smarter people, before me, like Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, have said, that it's quite possible that AI will spell, our civilizations doom, and in the end, they just might say, these people, what am I keeping them on Earth for, What do you think? So I would like to ask my question in two parts. The first part is, should we worry for our physical existence now and in the future? And number two, because again, we're finance people, when things get to a point where they look a little chaotic and a little too risky, what do we say? Oh, we need more regulation. So what are the possible checks and balances, that are being implemented today, or they should be implemented, so that we avoid, this dark, Terminator, Skynet, type of future?
Again, 100 questions in one. Thank you, Kalin. But there are several things. Again, just my personal view. I'm happy to be challenged and so on. But I do think there are. I worked with Office of Responsible AI for years at Microsoft on a daily, weekly basis, and even the term responsible AI was coined by my mentor there in 2016. So I could write encyclopedias about incidents of irresponsible AI, what can go wrong with this technology. So it's very, very real. In terms of real life in finance and other industries, these are manageable, just like cybersecurity. There's a whole profession called algorithm auditing. I'm one, so I can look at AI systems and say this is high risk, here are some interventions you could consider, pros, cons, budgets, etc. So this is something doable, we shouldn't be afraid of it. The comparison that I always share is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is kind of 10 years ahead of AI. If you're not buttoned up in cybersecurity, you will be hacked. Something will go wrong. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Same thing with AI. If you don't put the guardrails in place, if you don't do your impact assessments, minimize the risk, be ready to manage the risks when things will go wrong, then you'll be fine. That's the best we can do practically in our industry. Now, in terms of bigger questions, AI against humanity, physical existence, etc., I do think, yes, there is a risk. And all these, Elon Musk was my classmate at university, and all these smart people in Silicon Valley especially are building bunkers and so on. These are in the news, right? They are building their backup plans on the moon or space, whatever. But I'm a practical person. I think we cannot the time is now in terms of responsible AI. And I wrote an article in the Forbes magazine about this. We cannot outsource the responsibility of responsible AI. What I mean is, we can't just say, oh, regulations is government's job, or big tech should take care of us, or whoever, academia should step up. No, just like in democracies, and I can say this because I'm Turkish, we all know the challenge and opportunity with democracies, we have to step up as individuals and citizens to protect the democracy. If we don't, it's usually too late. Same with technology, especially same with AI. So, very practical suggestion, if you see something cheeky with the AI tools that you're using, something doesn't look right, something is looking for your data that you should not be sharing, then report it. There are 4 or 5 fantastic incident databases, MIT, General One, etc. Report it so that somebody who's supposed to take action takes action, rather than just not even noticing it or not speaking up. This is my most practical, and there are many other resources I can share if any of you are interested. And the time is now. If we don't put this now, yes, it may come. It may come. Because when you look at all these circles of experts, I'm super sorry to say, these are not the best personalities. Right? I mean, if you were classified
classmates with some of these characters, you wouldn't be friends with them. So, who are we going to trust? Ourselves. And making sure we do the right thing as a society and as individuals and organizations.
Brian, what's your position?
Yes. It's powerful. If we are thinking about it as like a nuclear weapon, then absolutely there's a risk of our annihilation. I mean, it's pretty obvious that there's essentially a nuclear arms race to have AI right now, and it doesn't seem to be stopping. And if we want to have checks and balances, we should at least have a threshold like, you know, Anthropic's, okay, we're not going to use this right now for mass surveillance and autonomous weaponry. That should be the bare minimum. Like that shouldn't even be a debate. But we have it, and because it's a nuclear arms race, and because somebody, and they're competing, and some other organization is going to step up. And to Didem's point, we need to be the ones, we need to react to that type, we need to inform ourselves. But also, these organizations need to do the work to map these things out. They need to become more explainable. We as an industry need to map out, we need to understand bias. There's great work at Anthropic that is using LLMs to actually find some causal relationships to the outputs of large language models, and if we can actually map everything out, which is actually helping us explain our own brains, but we should be able to explain these things so that we can create thresholds so that they don't annihilate us. In the industry, there's bias. There's bias based off of its training data, and this bias, it's funny how much it mimics our own bias too. There's framing effects. Now this is, you can, not necessarily something we would do, but positional bias. So if you just ask the large language model to create buy-sell recommendations from a series of financial ratios, if you put profit margin at the beginning versus the end, it'll give you a different answer. So these are just kind of like basic biases. And then there's also framing effects where you give it the probability of a loss is 10% versus the probability of a gain is 90%. It will ultimately bias towards the gain. So these are things we need to be able to measure. If we can measure this bias, that there's no like right or wrong bias. However, there's a right or wrong bias for an industry, for a society. So we need to be able to measure it so that we can make informed decisions. And so that's the bare minimum of checks. We need to be able to explain these things.
I hear what both of you are saying, but I don't know, maybe I'm just more a conspiracy theorist, or I'm just not being convinced, and of course, the time is already advancing, so I would like to just give the audience the opportunity to ask questions, but just, maybe just one final thought from me. So I hear what you're saying, and I would like to believe, that, this benevolent and altruistic thoughts, can actually materialize. But looking back in the history of humanity, we don't really have much of a successful track record with self-regulating ourselves. So you look at things like, yes, we're going to have a quota on the burning of coals, for example. And of course, we know that that's not happening. These quotas are being just completely, broken, and everybody's cheating the system. Or, we're going to use this mineral, well, and we're just going to source mineral water and bottle it, in bottles and just sell it in the supermarkets. But there's going to be a quota for environmental, reasons. Everybody cheats the quota, left and right, and in the more recent history of technology, one direct comparison that I'm seeing, we were, for example, in the blockchain space, in crypto, in 2019, we were actually making very big strides on the side of self-regulation. I don't think they lasted more than 6 months, because regulators quickly figured out that's not going to happen. There's all kinds of bumps and dumps, just annihilation of personal wealth, through scams, protection of minority shareholders is not happening. So now we're talking about a race to who is going to win the nuclear battle, or how quickly my bots are going to overpower the other, my enemies. I just don't see self-regulated. Responsible AI sounds very nice. I would love to believe it.
Can I give an example? Yeah. So I do think we need to focus on what we can control. Pretty much anything, like anything else in life, right? We can't boil the ocean, but we can control. So I want to share an absolutely wonderful example that I went through last year. So this was a top 3 bank in an emerging country, actually very nearby, shall we say. And the country doesn't even have AI regulations yet. So there's no compliance problem. This bank found us and they said, Didem, we have 400 AI systems. This is the 3rd largest bank in this country. And 400 AI systems is a bit like having 100 ERP systems. It's a mess. It's a lot of AI orchestration. And they said, we know we are doing something's wrong. Like, we know we are exposed. And we want to put the guardrails in place because we want to protect our business. We don't want to go out of business. Can you help us? And these guys came, not because somebody was telling them regulations, chasing them, compliant. They stood up and said, we have to do something about this. This is all we need to do. As individuals, as leaders of our organizations, that's all, and then it adds up. I really think so. I mean, that's what I mean by we can't outsource the responsibility, and it adds up, and then you have a dominance of, a gravitas, if I may say so, of, okay, we are going towards this side or that side. And then the rest will be history, but we do want to be on the right side of the history. That's what I'm trying to say.
Let's give the audience also the opportunity to comment, ask questions. Go ahead. Can somebody assist people with microphones?
Hello, thank you for the insightful discussion. My question is, if you need to name the top challenge right now for leveraging AI efficiently in the finance industry, what would it be?
Change management, I would say. No, seriously, it's not the technology. And technology is getting easier and easier to learn. The change management, what I mean by that is, I'm literally, after 15 years of AI transformations, I went ahead and learned executive coaching. Not to become an executive coach, to help me with my work, because if you ask the right questions, if you inspire people, if you empower them to think for themselves, then it's their baby. So my point is, whether it's finance or retail, doesn't matter, across the board, human nature is like, there's an elephant in the room, right? Am I going to lose my job? We have to address that. Your job will change. Now, how do you want to create value? Shall we sit down and proactively rewrite your job description or your team's mission? There's so much to do. So many problems to solve, so many opportunities to create value. But if we don't do that exercise, then there's resistance, there's fear, there's all sorts of things, and nobody wants to do anything with AI. But that's exactly the opposite of what should be done.
Thank you.
Me or the gentleman in front? Yeah, okay, so I wanted to ask, to what extent do you think AI can reduce the impact of behavioral biases in the financial markets?
Well, for one, very similar to humans, again, if you educate, if you provide in the context a window of a large language model what the biases are, they actually can mitigate their own biases. So if you remember from CFA program, it's seek out an external opinion, educate yourself on it. Like these actually work quite well. At CFA Institute, we are very soon going to be publishing a piece on bias. And we've actually created a Claude skill that has a few of the behavioral finance biases like framing effect and things like that, that when you ever kind of ask your Claude a question on investments, it will bring up a lot of the same behavioral biases that we have into its context window and evaluate both your prompt and its own output if it's subject to any of those types of biases. Now those are of course just a few examples and there's tons, but this is again where we can come together as an industry in an open source environment and build onto these skills.
Thank you for the compelling panel so far. Ms. Ateş, earlier you gave an example of a client of yours that is managing several family offices and their wealth management. Can you elaborate a little bit on this? And firstly, and secondly, to what extent can we rely on AI for capital allocation and decision making? And thirdly, what methods and philosophies an AI user should employ to improve complex results and complex projects completion?
Okay, let me start with the first one if I forget you. So the first one, and if you're interested, we wrote an executive briefing. I'm very happy to email it to anyone who may be interested. There is right now an open source hedge fund project on GitHub. I don't know if you've heard, but I'm following that closely, and we wrote an executive briefing about it for our clients because it's basically using what I explained in one of my examples, a swarm of agents to do something in finance. It's doing that for hedge funds. And coming back to my client with the 4 family offices, it's exact same concept, but we have to do it safely, right? So I hope that answers your question. There's a lot more detail that I can share in kind of report format. But what I'm fascinated by is, like Brian mentioned, creativity, right? Creativity here is, okay, I look at Warren Buffett, this, that, etc., all the best investors in the world, learn from them and use algorithms to do the best investments for me. This is possible, technically. Now, comes to your second question, if I understand correctly, would we trust AI to do this? Of course, I would say not. Very, very carefully. So this AI hedge fund project, we share it with our clients and recommend them to use it as a simulation tool or a training tool. You hire the new person, play around with this game, not use it to make your actual investments, because I personally don't think that the safety, the impact assessments, the responsible AI things are there yet, but it will get there. And the simulation part is important because it's a bit like my son doing investments with eToro or something. You give them a little budget just to get the flavor of the exercise. I think once you get confident that actually this is working for me in pilots, if I may say, you could do that. I'm sorry, what was your third question? There was a third question in your... I'm sorry.
Yeah, the third question was what methods and philosophies an AI user or financed AI user must employ to achieve better results and solve complex projects or problems.
So I don't know how, I mean, pretty much everything in finance is complex, right? There is not much of straightforward, if you think about it. But how we work with our clients on this, we don't boil the ocean. It has to be very impactful, practical, doable in daily life. So typically what they ask or help us with is 2 things. Can you help me draft my AI policy? I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but we can draft these things, what could go wrong, what are the categories, how do you prioritize risk? Do you already have a risk register so you can actually monitor everything in one? That's kind of on the compliance side. Then most clients also ask us to prepare a very practical guideline of, I am an investor, unintentionally, what could I be doing wrong and mess up and maybe get fired even? Because let's face it, I mean, 85% of the irresponsible AI cases in finance is actually generating documents with chat. People are using LLMs to prepare SIMs, prepare whatever, memos, all these things, and then it hallucinates. They don't even do prompt engineering properly, so it makes up stuff. These are the most frequent cases we are seeing. So these are very manageable. Training for prompting how to talk to AI is very doable, but most people unfortunately don't do it at company level. And then having like, this is what you could be doing wrong in your IC meetings or preparations or decks. So that's what, we try to keep it very practical.
All right. So thank you for the great presentation. I have a little bit of a cynical question, so I apologize already in advance. So when we when we learned Excel, then later on Excel VBA, then later on Python or R, all of these were for free. We paid nothing. Now it's AI. If we say it's a skill, at least we pay $20 a month. Actually, you need 200. Cloud Max even has limits with 200. And those companies make losses. So we can assume that those prices will go up. So maybe one day $2,000 a month. So my question is it really a skill that everybody can afford to have? Because the prices will go up and not down, right?
I talk too much.
I mean, if you have the computation, there's also open source models. But of course, that is an affordability issue. One of the things that I was just going to say about cost is they continue to go down. So, so back in the day, we were talking about Moore's Law, the amount of transistors that we can fit on some silicon. Now we talk about compute in tokens, and so what was that? NVIDIA's Hopper, H200 Hopper, which came out in November of 23, and then in March of 24, the Blackwell came out and had a 35x reduction in tokens, cost per million tokens, which is massive. But of course, at the same time, between 2024 and 2025, the amount of tokens had increased 3,800%. And this is that Javan's paradox, where as it comes down in cost, we have an insatiable appetite. We start finding more and more use cases for that. But I do think that costs in compute are going to continue to go down, but you're going to be kind of lagging behind the frontier.
I agree, but fascinating question, by the way. On a serious note, a couple of comments I would like to add to Brian's. First, Excel was not free either, and not yet, or shouldn't have been free, let's say. But some people, if we go back there, in the 80s, some people, when Excel came out, some people were still trying to do their valuation calculations in hard copy notebooks. Those people didn't survive. So, number one, we have to accept this is rule of the game. Number two, costs are actually reducing, I agree, but there is a reality of right now when you're hiring AI talent, you don't just talk about compensation, you talk about compensation package plus token budget, which can be 5 times your compensation. So this is the reality that we are in right now. And final comment I would like to make is, first of all, please do not, I heard from at least one professional today that they are using free version. Do not use free versions of these tools. Please don't do that to yourself, to your data. And the quality of the outputs are also like imbecilic compared to the paid versions. But there are alternatives if you want to keep the cost down. So I went to an OpenClaw demo night a few weeks ago in London, in a dodgy neighborhood where I literally dressed down to blend in because it's like, seriously, like 80 developers with tattoos all over, and like 2 women in 80. I just seriously had to just sat at the back and watched. This is a funny story, but I think it's worth sharing. One guy came up, it's a demo night, so everybody's showing what they achieved with OpenClaw. This guy comes up and says, I made a VC, like I'm a VC and I have my agents making money for me. So he has an agent for AI art, that generates AI art, sells it for him, makes money. He has an AI agent for influencer on Instagram, an e-commerce agent, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. And this is really making money for him. He showed them my one. The funny thing about coming back to costs, he said, the AI artist agent, he said, like, this is so ugly, nobody's going to pay for this. And then he said, the agent came back to him, my art speaks for itself. The people who understand my art will pay for it. This is the reality. And he keeps his cost low by going to open source, like he's paying $5 a month rather than paying 20 and so on. So there are ways. The last thing about that incident, somebody in the audience asked this guy, my God, how could you trust these tools, OpenClaw? You gave 4 credit cards so that they can make money for you. And I'm listening like this, like I'm very curious about the answer. He says, forgive my language, this is his words. Well, because I know none of my agents can fuck up my life worse than I can. And this is a genius. I'm sorry to say, but this is the reality. And then I go to my meetings in Mayfair with billionaires. That's the life we are in. We have to connect, regardless of the cost.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you still have many questions. I do as well. You should look at my list. I actually cut it short. One of our esteemed panelists actually needs to catch a plane. So what I would suggest is that we wrap it up. It's only suitable. We're just closing up on the 10th hour. Since the beginning of the conference, we will hang around, a little more after we finish here, and let's just have a little bit more of an informal discussion. Seeing that Nikolai Vasiliev is not here, I would like to invite Gloria, our amazing CEO, to the stage and ask her to give the closing remarks in appreciation of the wonderful work that she's done for this conference. And in general.
Thanks a lot, Kalin, and thank you all for participating today. It was really an honor for us for having you in Sofia. Thanks to all the guests today for joining us, and also, of course, our guests from the C countries. Thank you guys for being here. So I'm honored to have today the chance to say once again thank you, and I hope that we could welcome you soon on our next event. Thanks again for everyone for joining us.